This is Alex, my 8-year-old cousin. Alex is a happy kid. He loves gymnastics, soccer, football, basketball, overall just very energetic. All my life I've known him, Alex has always been full of joy. Always laughing and smiling and just always a happy kid. My favorite memory with Alex is a day we spent in Ohio riding our bikes. Alex wanted to be like me. He wanted to go super fast. He wanted to go shoot past me. And at one point, he fell off his bike and bruised his knees. So I ran up to him because he's crying, and I'm trying to sign to him, "How are you? Are you fine? Are you okay?" And he was just so confused and scared, and he didn't understand me. And so with uncontrollable tears in my eyes, I started to cry and I started to embrace him. And now he's more confused because we're both sitting there crying. And I just wanted him to learn how to express himself, to tell me what was wrong with him and how I could help. Because I wanted him to know the beauty and possibility that comes with everyone having access to a shared language and reliable communication. You see, Alex was born deaf. And for 8 years of his life, he was completely disconnected from the world. He had no access to language, no access to communication. He didn't know his grandmother's language, Sapo. He didn't know American Sign Language, and he didn't know English. He didn't know how to express himself. He couldn't tell you what his favorite food was, what his favorite color was. At the age of 8, you see, Alex could see a rainbow, but he couldn't tell you how it made him feel. He could see the world, but he didn't understand what was in it. You see, Alex was born into a hearing family, a family that immigrated from West Africa when I was a child. Our family struggled with understanding it was just a lot of culture shock being in the US, in a new country. And our grandmother, whom Alex lived with, didn't have any formal education, so she didn't know how to give him the resources that he needed to be successful. And because Alex was deaf, he couldn't learn a spoken language, nor was he provided with the resources to do so. Globally, there are over 70 million deaf people in the world, with about 2% of them having access to education in sign language. 10% of deaf children are born to deaf parents, leaving about 90% of deaf children being born into hearing families. 75% of hearing families do not communicate with their children through sign language. And sadly for Alex, he was part of the 75% because his family would never learn his language. His family would never know how to communicate with him at home. But this isn't just Alex's story. This is the story of millions of deaf children in the United States and around the world. The story of millions of people that struggle with language barriers. The stories of millions of people that are isolated from society because they're different. You see, for Alex and his deafness, all he wanted to do was learn how to fit into a hearing society or just into the world. His school system didn't want to go the extra mile to introduce Alex to a world and culture and language that already exists for him. His family didn't want to learn his language, but also because they didn't have the resources to do so. And for us, we very rarely try to experience another person's reality. Instead, we focus on changing them, changing what makes people different. And sadly for Alex, that was his deafness. See, the power of when I was able to take Alex to deaf camp last summer, and this experience forever changed his life. He was able to be in a community with people that looked like him, with people that wore a hearing aid like he did. He was able to experience a whole new world that existed for him. He was able to be a part of a community that embraced who he was. And he was able to make friends and talk to people for the first time in his whole entire life. He was able to have language. He was able to have communication. And for me, I got to watch that. I got to experience that. I got to sit on the sidelines and watch him. And sometimes he would see me, he would run up to me, he would give me the best hugs, because Alex gives the best hugs. And he would just look at me and he would tell me, "Good morning." And I was like, "Oh, hi, you know that word now. Cool." Or he would be like, "I'm happy." And that's the only sound he knew, right? He was always happy. And so, I'm just here like, just thinking like, oh man, him giving me this hug is just his way of telling me thank you. Thank you for introducing me to a culture and world that I can be a part of, that I can see myself in. And he had all these little friends and all these little kids would be running around with him, and they'll all come up to me and be like, "Are you Alex's mom?" And I'm like, "No, I'm too young to be his mom." And I'll tell them, "Oh, I'm his cousin." And they'll be like, "Oh, it makes sense because he doesn't know how to sign, and neither do you." And I'll just be like, "Yeah, that's right. But we're learning, so that counts for something, right?" But they were just all so gracious, and they just welcomed us into that community, welcomed us into that family. And I just saw this kid grow, and I saw someone that was hungry and thirsty to learn more and to be able to talk to people. And now Alex is at Maryland School for the Deaf, where he's learning every single day. I just spent a weekend with him, and he comes up to me, and I asked him, "How are you?" And this time he didn't tell me he was happy. So I was really shocked, but also very happy, because he told me, "Oh, I'm so tired. I've just been jumping around and running around and flipping around. Yeah, I'm tired." And I'm like, "What? What happened to you?" And just to see his progress from the summer to now, and to see how he's turned into this like happy, joyful kid that just loved to talk to people. And I remember him taking me around church on Sunday and asking me like, "Who is this person? What's their name? And who's this person? And what's their name?" And I go around and I'm like, "Oh man, okay, this person, this is their name, and this person, this is their name." And just seeing him wanting to learn more and wanting to know more. And Alex's experience taught me that the power of communication and the power of communication isn't only the bridge between cultures and communities, but is the bridge that truly make a person understand who they are as an individual, how they fit into society, how they fit into the world. It is the bridge that of existing communities where the deaf can communicate, where the deaf can understand. And it may look different from your community, it may look different from my community, but that's okay. Because the power of communication is the bridge that connects us to the whole world and to the people within it. You see, it made a difference for me to see a world that exists for Alex, a world that is full of opportunities for him, a world where he is seen, heard, and understood. I fell in love with little Alex, and in doing so, I fell in love with the deaf community. I fell in love with deaf culture, people, language. I fell in love with everything that there was. I learned how to sign. I spent my summers learning how to sign. I spent every single day FaceTiming Alex to make sure that when he goes home, he's not anymore that 75% because someone in his family knows his language. Someone in his family is willing to go the extra mile. Because you see, Alex went to a hearing school for a while. And his hearing school didn't want to go the extra mile to incorporate American Sign Language into their curriculum for him. Instead, they were trying to focus on making Alex fit into a hearing society. But Alex didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And so for me, I will continue to be an advocate for Alex, an advocate for the deaf community. I will continue to incorporate American Sign Language into my daily life, to make going to deaf camp a tradition not only for Alex, but for my future family and myself. And so I challenge you. I challenge you to live in another person's reality, to embrace their story. I challenge you to live in a world where what makes someone different doesn't scare us, but that we welcome that into our world. Because for me, when I see Alex and I see the deaf community, sometimes I wonder what it would be like for them to experience joy, not only in isolated deaf spaces, but in the whole world. And to know that they also belong in this world. And it's not just a hearing world and a deaf world, but it's everyone's world. And what makes us different and what makes us beautiful. And we need to embrace that. And so I challenge you to learn how to communicate with someone else, to learn a different way of communicating with another person, because everyone deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. And so I challenge you, and I'll leave you with this. How will you help someone be seen, be heard, or be understood? Thank you.